Welcome to Mutual Fund Sahi hai presents Smart Nivesh, Sahi Nivesh powered by Times Network. In today's episode, we are shifting our focus to one of the most important investments you can make, your education. While we often think of education as an expense, it is in fact one of the most powerful assets that can open doors to opportunities, growth and financial security. Whether you are planning for your child's higher education, upgrading your own skills or navigating the rising cost of quality learning, making smart financial decisions today can ensure a brighter future tomorrow. To help us navigate this crucial topic, we have two seasoned experts in the studio today. Namita Mehta, founder of the RedPen, and Pankaj Mathpal, managing director of Optima Money Managers. All right, Namita and Pankaj, welcome to the show. And a very crucial goal, planning your education or maybe your child's education. Let's begin with inflation. All right, we will definitely explain our viewers the kind of steps that they need to take in terms of planning this very important investment, very important financial goal. But before that, let's understand why you need to plan. Okay, a lot of us actually believe that being parents, you need to give the best education to your children. Okay, I don't know if my parents actually planned for my education, but they're now looking at the kind of investor interest that's growing and the kind of financial goals that they have lined up for themselves. Planning their child education is one of the most important financial goals. So how can we talk about inflation being one of the crucial aspects when you plan your child's education or even your education going ahead?
So that's a really great question, Kavita. I mean, we all know that education inflation is at an all-time high, like at a 10% compared to the regular inflation. So when you're thinking about your child's education, whether it's at the undergrad, postgrad, or MBA level, you need to factor that into one of the decision makers when you're thinking about where you want to send your child. And, of course, when you're thinking about the best education for my child, you're thinking about where should they go? Should they stay in India? Should they go abroad? What courses should they take? What additional programs should they do? All of that you're thinking about. And in addition to that, you also need to obviously factor in the cost of education.
Right. So how can you go about it? When we talk about cost of education, obviously it will differ for all the levels. But for example, you are starting 10 years ahead of time. How do you plan all of this?
Kavita, as Namita mentioned just now, see, inflation education is higher than the headline inflation. When we talk about the general inflation, 6 to 7%, in education, we see around 10%. So if, for example, somebody wants to have 25 lakh today, after 15 years at 10% rate, it will be something like 1 CR. So it means 25 lakh is a very small amount. If you talk about the MBA courses or some courses abroad, it may be much higher as on today also. But I'm saying general education, 25 lakh is a very average cost of education. For higher education, professional education, we are talking about. So 25 lakh today, after 15 years, will be something like 1 CR. So first thing, you have to consider inflation. You have to factor in that. Second thing, planning. See, it looks very big amount, 1 CR. If I say today, it looks big. But you have to see, you have 15 years in your hand. If you start planning early, it is not difficult. Right. For example, if I consider 12% compounded annual growth rate, somebody is planning today and after 15 years, somebody wants to accumulate 1 crore rupee. Do you know, if you want to start, say, example, SIP or you invest somewhere where you get 12% compounded annual growth rate, how much you have to invest? Something like 20,000 per month. And more important, because you are planning early, your income will increase, like we talk always, that you should increase your investment year after year. So if you opt for that, you increase your investment by 10% every year, you have to start with 12,000 per month.
Right.
Is it difficult? So accumulating 1 crore rupee looks difficult, but when you know that you have time in your hand, it becomes easier. So planning is very, very important. Earlier you plan, easier it is for you to accumulate bigger amount. Second thing, choice of investment product. Because if you are investing somewhere where you can't beat inflation, then it may become difficult. So starting early, choice of product should be correct, and discipline is the most important thing.
All right. And factor in inflation has to be a very crucial part of your planning as well. But then we are talking about different stages. of education planning. So different stages in education planning which might divert your entire planning that you might have done. So how do we prepare for that?
Okay, so that's a fantastic question, actually. So when you're thinking of the different stages of education, typically, the kids are small and you're thinking of school. Now, even in the school fees in a place like Mumbai vary, right? Whether you're talking about a local school, an IB school, or even an A-level school versus an IB school. There's so many different fee structures just for a regular schooling for a child. So you have to think about that. Then, if parents are thinking of sending their children to a boarding school, there's that option. Or you've got undergrad or you've got postgrad planning, right? Now, when you think about undergraduate education, that's something that is a lot of students are thinking about what they want to do after 12th standard. That's kind of like a very important inflection point. The planning, according to me, should start as early as 8th or 9th standard. Now, you might ask me why. The reason is that the global education landscape within India and internationally is evolving all the time. The options that we had 20 years ago, there's so many more options now. Right? So I think parents need to have an understanding of what there is, what offerings you have, so you can work backwards. I'll just give you one example. Like, let's say you're looking at studying at economics at an international university. Having maths at the highest level in your curriculum is absolutely crucial. Not even economics. If you've never studied economics, you can still apply, but if you don't have mathematics, you cannot. So sometimes children don't know that. They'll take, commerce stream without maths. Then they won't even be eligible for those universities. So one of those examples is, say, the London School of Economics and Political Science abroad, or even some of these tech universities, the new age Indian colleges that are also coming up. I just spoke to the Associate Director of Admissions at Plaksha University, which is like a tech university in Chandigarh. It's one of the new age colleges. And they said it's within a year, after a year's time, they're going to make mathematics compulsory at 12th standard for admission criteria.
Okay.
So if you kind of have an understanding of what is out there, what is in India, what is abroad, what is your child inclined toward,
sure,
you can kind of plan.
So how do we plan the in India and abroad education? If we are planning abroad, how does the currency work? And the cost that we are talking about is just enrolling cost. If you're going abroad, there has to be your living cost and everything else that you need to plan for. So how can one go about it?
Kavita, Namita is telling you to start at the age of, or when the student is in 8th and 9th standard.
Right.
I'll tell you when the child is born, that time only you should start planning.
SIP,
that is important, right? Because longer the horizon, easier it is for you to accumulate that wealth.
Yeah.
Now coming to your question that whether India or abroad, see, it depends on what kind of education a child wants to pursue. But still, see, as a parent, in the beginning means you never know that what will be the cost of the education what child pursues. But as I gave example of 25 lakh, for example, in India, if you talk about engineering from a private institute, it may be something like 25 lakh rupees. But if it is a medical studies in India from the private institute, it may be close to 1 CR as on today. Abroad, similarly, if you want to pursue something engineering there, it may cost you today like something like 1 crore rupees. So first thing that at least based on your financial standard, you have to see that how much you can afford. But whatever it is, first thing, if you are considering 25 lakh today, you have to understand that after certain years in future, what will be the requirement. You have to understand that, and based on that, you have to do planning. But sometime it may happen that even despite of planning, you are not able to accumulate how much you need.
Exactly.
Then comes the education loan. Then it's a different planning altogether, because borrowing money may be easier, but you have to understand the repaying
strategy for that.
How to plan for that. So that is why planning at every stage, whether accumulation for that goal, or if you are not able to create wealth as much required, then how to fill the gap.
We will talk about the part where mutual funds can really be helpful in accomplishing this particular goal. But then talking about applying in Indian colleges and even abroad, what are the key factors that one really needs to keep in mind?
Okay, so typically I like to look at them in 3 major buckets, right?
Okay.
When we're looking at applications to universities in India or abroad, what are universities looking for? So in my head, it's data, your talent, and your voice. I'll quickly talk about that. So what do I mean by data? The first thing that universities look at are your grades, right? I'm going to talk about this from an undergrad perspective, but the same framework applies for postgrad and MBA as well. So if I'm looking at it from an undergrad perspective, if you're applying for a college after 12th standard abroad, what do they look at? They look at what grades you've been getting in high school. So in the US, they care about everything from 9th standard onwards. Okay. They look at your 9th standard internal marks, 10th standard internal marks, 11th standard internal marks, 12th standard internal marks, as well as your boards. In the UK, they care mostly about the boards. In Canada, it's a combination. Europe also only cares about the board results. So you see, it's very variable.
Yeah.
But data is very important. They also look at standardized tests, right? At the undergrad level, we're talking about the SAT score or the ACT score, the TOEFL. Maybe for postgrad degrees, they look at the GRE score or the GMAT score as well. So all of this encompasses data. And that is kind of the foundation of your application. It's the university's assessing to see, okay, is this child going to be able to cope with the academic rigor in my institution? Yes, okay, now let's move on. What else do they look at? They're going to look at your talent. So when I talk about talent, I'm talking about anything that you're doing outside of the classroom. So if you're doing any extracurricular activities, may it be sport or music or dance or doing research or doing internships, they take that into account in the application process. And then you've got the voice aspect. Now the voice aspect is more near the application. It's the kind of story or the narrative that you tell in your application. Now, in the US, for example, like I said, they exhibit something called holistic admissions. So in addition to all the data points and a list of all the extracurricular activities that you submit to them, you have to write some essays. And these are more reflective essays. It's an opportunity for you to shape the narrative of your application. They're looking for, when universities are assessing your candidacy, it's data, talent, and voice that is kind of what they look at in the admissions committee.
And how have we changed in India as far as applying is concerned?
So that's a good question. So when we're looking at mainstream Indian education, for students who want to study engineering, law, or say medicine, it's very, very direct. It's still the pathway is pretty traditional. You end up doing those entrance exams. So for medicine, you do the NEET. For law, you do the CLAT. For engineering, it's either JE or CET or eventually advanced if you're looking at IIT, right? So that pathway is pretty standardized and hasn't changed much. Of course, recent years, they're now insisting that you achieve a 75% in your 12th board. These small tweaks happen, but typically that is the pathway.
Sure.
So that's how it is.
Sure. How do we plan all of this now in terms of doing the financial planning, in terms of beginning your investment and using mutual funds as one of the vehicle to achieve this goal?
See, as I mentioned, that one has to start early. As soon as you start, it's better for you. Second thing, I mentioned about the product choice. So mutual fund is one of the best choices, I'll tell you. The reason when we're considering 10% inflation in education, you tell me any product or any asset class which can offer better than equity. So equity is one asset class which has potential to deliver higher returns. So that is why one can definitely plan accumulating wealth for education through mutual funds. And SIP in mutual fund is the best route because there is so much flexibility. You start with a smaller amount. With your increase in income, you can increase the amount of SIP. There's a flexibility. You can top up. You can invest lump sum in that. So mutual fund is a product. It gives you diversification. Various kinds of products are available based on the horizon. See, as I mentioned, if you start early, you have 15 years, 12 years time horizon. Definitely, you can aggressively invest in mutual funds. If you are somehow missed, even you want to start little later, then also you can invest in hybrid funds or something like large cap mutual funds or flexi cap funds. Starting early, you can invest more aggressively in small cap, mid cap. So many choices are available. So mutual fund, I feel that if you want to create wealth, you want to achieve your financial goal for children's education, mutual fund can definitely serve that purpose.
But how aggressive can you go as far as equity mutual fund is concerned? How do you decide the asset allocation for that?
Kavita, I'll tell you, if you have really 15 years, 12 years investment horizon, if you invest 80% to 100% in equity-oriented mutual fund, then also there's nothing wrong. But when we say mutual funds, you know that there are different categories. So aggressively does not mean that one should go only with the micro cap or small cap. But if you go with the diversified portfolio of large cap, mid cap, small cap, or through multi cap, flexi cap, where you have exposure to various sectors and across the market caps. So that can be a good choice. But as I mentioned, if somebody wants to start a little later and you have only 5 years, 6 years in your hand, skip small cap, invest in flexi cap, large cap or hybrid funds. So you have choices available with you. But as I mentioned, it will be very difficult to achieve your financial goal without help of equity. And for equity, when I mentioned equity, the mutual fund is the good product. Because if you depend on a product which offers you 7%, 8% return, then how much you have to invest? I'm not saying it's impossible. But if you want to create wealth and returns are lower than inflation, it means the amount of investment has to be very high, which becomes a little difficult because along with the children education, you definitely have other financial goals in your life. So that is why mutual fund I consider is the one of the best choices when you want to create wealth in long term. So if you're starting early, do not miss mutual funds in your portfolio.
When we talk about upgrading and upskilling for working professionals, and going for higher education or maybe having a much more professional aspect to their resume or to their career, how does the planning differ?
So the planning for that is a lot more job-based, right? Like if you are in a particular career, in fact, an MBA is a great example of this, right? Typically, now it's kind of a pathway that exists, but it's typically younger professionals who kind of are aspiring to reach those CEO roles that often go off and do an MBA. But if you're looking at just skill development, maybe if I'm, now AI has come in and I want to make sure that I'm staying on top of whatever I'm doing my work. So in marketing, that's a perfect example, right? I mean, AI in marketing is just something that is happening, right? So to upskill yourself. In fact, the last CMO at my company was very clear that I need to go and upskill myself, right? So for them as well, as a professional, keeping aside a certain amount of money to kind of access those programs is very important. Now, the kind of programs that you access can vary. I mean, sometimes there's online free programs, there's MOOCs, there's paid programs. Sometimes it's in person where you go off and do like a couple of months somewhere, you do these OPMs, or there's a range of different kind of opportunities when it comes to upskilling. And you typically figure that out while you're on the job. And how do you kind of plan for that? You would kind of plan maybe a year or two in advance where, okay, like I really want to do this program. It takes you that much time to apply. Then you have to notify your job. Sometimes the job will also sponsor you for these programs as well, because they know that when you upskill and come back, there's a lot more value that you can add to your profession as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
What about taking education loan? Do you suggest that? Do you recommend that? And if at all one has to, what should be the criteria and basis for that?
See, suggestion depends on two things. One is that if you could not accumulate the desired amount, what is required, so definitely then the choice is only that education loan. Second thing, sometimes it also happens that because in education loans you get tax benefit and rates are not very high, interest rates are competitive. So considering that fact, if you are investing and you expect that your investment is generating more returns than the interest, sometime you may consider that. First thing is that when you really need that, you don't have the desired amount. So there is no choice. But second option, as I said, you have money available with you, but you think that your investment is offering you higher returns than the interest rate. In that case also you can leverage that. But if you are borrowing money, even if you have money with you and then you're borrowing, considering that your investment is creating more returns, you have to be very careful that your investment should be in such products where the risk is calculated. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no risk in the investment, but yes, you can afford to take that risk. That is one thing. Second thing, that if you are taking loan and you understand the repayment will be difficult for you. Sometimes people are very emotional. They need money for the education of their children, but they know the repaying capacity may be, if suppose a child does not get good job immediately after completion of that studies, and then become difficult. So you have to understand that if you are taking loan, your repayment capacity should be good enough. The kind of study your child is pursuing, how much scope for the employment is there, those things you have to consider. So taking education loan is not bad, but you have to consider these all things before going for that.
All right, I do have a lot of questions, but then my time is up for this discussion. Thank you so much for being on the show and helping our viewers plan their education for the kids as well as for themselves. Thank you so much for joining in today. And that's a wrap from my end. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.